Have you ever noticed that you always seem to attract the same type of people? The broken ones, the ones who need help, the people who come to you carrying their problems, their pains, their open wounds. And you, like a magnet, just can't seem to say no. You absorb their pain. You carry their weight. And at the end of the day, you're left exhausted, empty, emotionally drained. While they walk away feeling relieved, you're stuck carrying the burden. This isn't a coincidence. It's not bad luck. And it's definitely not because you're too nice of a person. There's a deep neurological and psychological reason why this keeps happening. Carl Jung identified this pattern almost a century ago. And Andrew Huberman, the neuroscientist from Stanford, has explained the exact brain mechanism behind it. And what I'm about to reveal to you today is going to completely change how you understand your relationships. Jung identified an archetype that he called the wounded healer. This archetype originates from Greek mythology, specifically from the centaur Chiron. Chiron was an extraordinary healer. He knew all the medicinal herbs, all the healing techniques. But there was one crucial detail. He himself carried an incurable wound. A poisoned arrow had struck his knee, and that wound never healed. He could heal anyone except himself. Jung realized that this myth describes a real psychological pattern. People who are drawn to roles of healing, people who are naturally sought out by others when they're in pain, often carry their own deep, unhealed wounds. It's not despite their wounds that they become healers. It's because of them. Our study, published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology, revealed that 73.9% of therapists report having had significant personal wounding experiences before entering the profession. That's no coincidence. The wound is what creates the sensitivity. The wound is what allows you to understand the pain of others. The wound is what attracts other wounded people. But here's where Huberman's neuroscience comes in, explaining exactly how this works in the brain. There's a system in your brain called the mirror neuron system. These neurons were discovered accidentally in the 1990s by Italian researchers. They were studying the brains of monkeys when they noticed something strange. The same neurons that fired when a monkey grabbed a banana also fired when the monkey simply watched another monkey grab a banana. The brain was literally mirroring the observed action. In humans, this system is extraordinarily developed. It's what allows for empathy. When you see someone in pain, your mirror neurons fire as if you were feeling that pain. Literally. It's not a metaphor. Your brain processes observed pain using the same areas that process real pain, but not everyone has equally active mirror neuron systems. Huberman has explained in his podcasts that there are significant variations between individuals. Some people have hyperactive systems, others have hypoactive systems. If you're someone who attracts people who need to be healed, it's very likely that your mirror neuron system is hyperactive. You feel the pain of others as if it were your own. Not because you choose to, but because your brain is literally built that way. And here's the disturbing part that no one tells you. Narcissists tend to have hypoactive mirror neuron systems. They don't feel the pain of others with the same intensity. This doesn't mean they're evil. It means that neurologically, they process empathy differently. Now think about this for a moment. You have a hyperactive system. You feel everything. You absorb the pain of everyone around you. And then someone with a hypoactive system appears. Someone who can't feel their own pain adequately. Someone who needs another person to process their emotions for them. You fit together, neurologically, perfectly, tragically. You provide the emotional processing they can't do on their own. They provide a seemingly endless source of pain for you to process. It's like a plug and a socket, complementary. But the energy only flows in one direction. Jung called this complementary projection. Two people with opposite wounds are attracted to each other because each carries what the other needs. But the tragedy is that this attraction doesn't lead to healing. It leads to the burnout of one and the dependence of the other. There's another brain mechanism that Huberman explains that further deepens this pattern. It's called the default mode network. The default mode network is what's active when you're not focused on anything specific. It's where self-reflection happens, rumination, thinking about yourself and others. And here's what's fascinating. Empaths, highly sensitive people, tend to have different activation patterns in this network. Specifically, research shows that people with high empathy have greater connectivity between the default mode network and areas of the brain that process the emotions of others. This means that even when you're at rest, even when you're not actively trying to understand someone, your brain is constantly processing the emotional states of others. You can't turn it off. Not because you don't want to, but because your brain wasn't built to turn it off. And this creates a cycle that Jung described with frightening accuracy almost 100 years before we had the tools to see the brain working. Jung said that the wounded healer attracts patients who carry the same wounds as they do, not just any wound, the same wounds. And this happens because the healer unconsciously recognizes something familiar in the pain of the other. They feel a resonance, a connection. And that connection is irresistible because it promises something that the healer secretly desires: to heal their own wound through the other. That's what you're doing when you attract broken people. You're not just helping them, you're trying, unconsciously, to resolve your own pain through the process of healing their pain. If I can fix this person, maybe I'll prove that I can be fixed too. If I can heal this wound in them, maybe I'll discover how to heal the same wound in myself. But it doesn't work that way. It never works that way. Jung was brutally honest about this. He said that no one can take another further than they themselves have gone. If you have an unhealed wound, you can help others up to the point where your own wound begins. After that, you're as blind as they are. And what happens when you reach that point? You burn out. You absorb pain you can't process. You carry weight that isn't yours. And the person you're trying to help doesn't truly get better because you're projecting your own non-healing onto them. Huberman explains the hormonal component of this. When you have a deep, empathetic interaction, your brain releases oxytocin. Oxytocin is often called the love hormone or the connection hormone. It makes you feel close, connected, bonded to the other person. But here's the problem. Oxytocin can also make you blind to danger signals. When you're flooded with oxytocin during a healing interaction, you don't notice you're being drained. You don't realize that the person is taking more than you can give. You just feel connection and interpret that as meaning that something good is happening. Your brain is literally conspiring against you. It rewards you for behaviors that destroy you. This isn't just some theory. It's documented neuroscience, and it explains why you keep repeating the same pattern, even when you consciously know you should stop. Let's talk about the 4 types of people you most often attract and why. The first type is what Jung would call the eternal child. This person has never grown up emotionally. They seek someone to be their emotional mother or father, someone to take care of them, to tell them it's going to be okay. To solve their problems, if you were parentified in childhood, if you had to take care of an emotionally unavailable parent, you recognize this pattern intimately, and the eternal child senses this in you. They can smell your early training to be a caregiver. The second type is the vulnerable narcissist. Unlike the grandiose narcissist who seems arrogant and dominant, the vulnerable narcissist seems fragile, hurt, in need of protection. They present themselves as a victim. And you, with your hyperactive mirror neuron system, step right into the role of savior. But the vulnerable narcissist is never satisfied. No matter how much you give into, it's never enough. Because their emptiness isn't something you can fill. It's a bottomless pit. The third type is what we might call the emotional vampire. This person doesn't necessarily have a personality disorder. They simply never developed the ability to process their own emotions. So they outsource that processing to you. After every conversation with them, you feel exhausted, not because the conversation was difficult, but because you literally did the emotional work that they should have been doing themselves. The fourth type is the inverted mirror. This person has the exact same wound as you, but expresses it in the opposite way. If your wound is abandonment, and you deal with it by becoming the perfect caregiver so that no one will leave you, The inverted mirror has the same abandonment wound, but deals with it by becoming needy and clingy to guarantee they won't be left. You're attracted to each other because you recognize the same pain. But instead of healing each other, you reinforce each other's dysfunctional patterns. Jung had a name for this attraction: dark synchronicity. Events that seem like coincidence, but are actually the shadow attracting what it needs to continue existing. Your shadow, the part of yourself you don't want to see, your own unhealed wound, attracts the exact situations and people that keep the wound open, not because the universe is cruel, but because the psyche seeks completeness. And the wound is part of you that's screaming for attention. Huberman adds a layer to this with his explanation of neuroplasticity. Your brain changes based on what you practice. If you spend years being the healer, being the recipient of other people's pain, being the emotional processor for others, your brain literally molds itself for that role. The circuits that support this behavior become stronger. The circuits that would allow you to set boundaries become weaker. You become better and better at absorbing other people's pain, and worse at protecting yourself. This isn't fate, it's neuroplasticity. And the good news is that the same neuroplasticity that created the problem can create the solution. But that requires something that most wounded healers resist with all their might: stopping the healing of others and starting to heal themselves. Jung was absolutely clear about this. He said that the healer can only heal to the extent that he himself has been healed. If you want to stop attracting broken people, you need to fix what's broken in you first. This seems selfish to most healers. It feels like abandonment. It feels like betraying their own nature. But it's exactly the opposite. While you're busy healing everyone else, no one is healing you. And a wound that never receives attention doesn't heal. It becomes infected. It spreads. It eventually contaminates everything around it. Let me tell you about Mark. Mark was 42 years old when he came to see me. He'd been a clinical psychologist for 15 years, 120 patients a month. Everyone sought him out. Colleagues, friends, family. Even strangers on the subway would end up telling him their problems. He had that presence. That energy that says, "Tell me your pain." But Mark was destroyed inside. His marriage had ended. His ex-wife said something he could never forget. "You give so much to others that there's nothing left for me." He was medicated for anxiety and depression. He had developed heart problems that the doctors attributed to chronic stress. And most disturbing of all, he had started to feel anger towards his patients, a dull anger that he hid behind professional smiles, but that was corroding him from the inside out. Mark was the personification of the wounded healer who had never treated his own wound. When we looked at his history, we found exactly what Jung would predict. At 6 years old, Mark's mother developed severe depression after the death of her father. Mark became his mother's emotional caregiver. At 6 years old, he learned to read her moods, to know when to speak and when to be silent, to provide emotional comfort that a child should not be responsible for providing. This is what we call parentification. The child becomes the parent of the parent, and in the process, the child develops an extraordinary sensitivity to the emotional states of others, at the cost of never learning to take care of their own. Mark's mirror neuron system developed in an environment where tuning in to his mother's emotional states was a matter of survival. If he didn't notice when she was about to have an episode, he couldn't protect himself or try to prevent it. His brain literally built itself for hyperempathy because it was necessary to survive. And 36 years later, he was still doing the same thing, only now with the entire world. Mark's original wound was emotional abandonment. He never had an emotionally present mother for him because she was sunk in her own pain, so he became what he needed to receive: a caring presence, a receptacle for pain, a healer. Jung would call this compensation. When something essential is missing in our psyche, we create the exaggerated opposite: lack of care. So Mark became care personified. But the problem with compensation is that it doesn't heal the original wound. It just masks it. Every time Mark took care of someone, he was unconsciously trying to prove that caring was possible, that caregivers existed, that his mother could have cared for him if she wanted to. But it never worked, because he was healing the wrong people. The person who needed healing was him. Huberman talks about a phenomenon called somatic memory. Your body stores emotional experiences in ways that your conscious mind doesn't access. Mark's heart was literally carrying the weight of 36 years of unprocessed emotions. Each patient was more weight. Each person healed was just another frustrated attempt to heal himself through another. The breaking point came when Mark realized he hated his job, not the patients individually. The very act of healing, the role he had built his entire life around, this was terrifying for him, because healer was his identity. Without it, who would he be? That is the fear that keeps the wounded healer trapped in the pattern. The wound has become the identity. The dysfunction has become the purpose. Healing the wound would mean losing who you are. Jung had an answer for this. That is deeply liberating when you truly understand it. He said the goal is not to eliminate the wound, it's to integrate it. The wound isn't a defect to be removed. It's a door to depth that unwounded people never access. The wounded healer doesn't need to stop being a healer. He needs to heal himself first, to then be able to truly heal. Huberman adds the neurological perspective. He explains that neuroplasticity has no age limit. Your brain can create new circuits at any stage of life. The hyperactive patterns of empathy that you've developed can be modulated. You don't have to shut them down completely. You need to learn to control them. There's a structure in the brain called the insula that's deeply involved in empathy. The insula processes both your internal sensations and your perception of other people's emotions. In people with high empathy, the insula often doesn't clearly distinguish between their own pain and someone else's pain. This is literally what happens when you absorb someone's emotions. Your insula is processing the other person's pain as if it were your own, because it hasn't learned to make the distinction. But, and this is crucial, that distinction can be learned. Practices of body awareness, meditation focused on internal sensations, and somatic therapy can train the insula to recognize the difference between self and other. It's not about becoming less empathetic. It's about becoming more discerning, feeling the other, without getting lost in the other. Mark started this work. It was difficult, painful. There were moments when he wanted to give up and go back to the familiar comfort of simply absorbing other people's pain. At least he knew how to do that. But little by little, something changed. He began to notice when he was absorbing versus when he was just witnessing. He realized that he could be present for someone's pain without carrying that pain home. He realized that his patients actually improved more when he was less emotionally entangled with them. This is what Jung called conscious versus unconscious participation mystique. When you unconsciously merge with the other, you get lost. When you consciously participate in the other's experience, while maintaining your separation, you can truly help. The irony that Mark discovered was that the more he healed himself, the better healer he became. Not despite taking care of himself, because of taking care of himself. If you've identified with this story, I need to ask you a direct question. When was the last time you received care, not gave it? Received it. When was the last time someone held space for your pain, listened to your problems, processed your emotions with you? If you're struggling to remember, that's a diagnosis in itself. Wounded healers are generally terrible at receiving. They flinch when someone tries to care for them. They change the subject. They say they're fine. They turn the attention back to the other person. This isn't humility. It's defense. It's fear of vulnerability. It's the wound protecting itself by ensuring that it's never touched. Huberman talks about how vulnerability activates fear circuits in the brain. The amygdala, the fear center, fires when we put ourselves in vulnerable positions. For people who were wounded early, especially by caregivers who were supposed to protect them. Vulnerability is neurologically associated with danger, so you've built a life where you never have to be vulnerable. You're always the strong one, the one who has the answers, the one who cares, never the one who needs care. But here's the truth that no one wants to hear. That strategy is killing you, literally. Research shows that emotional isolation, the inability to receive support, is a risk factor for mortality. As significant as smoking, your body needs reciprocal connection, not just giving, receiving too. And more than that, your original wound, the one that turned you into a healer in the first place, can only be healed in relationship. Jung was emphatic about this. Relational wounds require relational healing. You can't think your way out of this. You need to experience something different. You need to experience being cared for, being seen as, being held emotionally, without having to hold in return. This is terrifying for most wounded healers, but it's exactly what you need. Let me give you the 5 steps that Mark followed, and that you can adapt for your own journey. First step, recognize the original wound, not intellectually, viscerally. Go back to the moment where you first learned that you needed to be the caregiver. It's usually in childhood. It usually involves a parent who wasn't emotionally available. Find that moment. Feel the pain of that child, who should have been cared for and instead had to care. Second step, identify the current cost. List all the ways the wounded healer pattern is affecting you now. Failed relationships, chronic exhaustion, repressed anger, health problems, inability to receive. See the real cost. Not to blame yourself, to motivate change. Third step, start practicing receiving in small doses. Don't try to suddenly accept all the vulnerability that you've avoided for decades. Start small. Let someone pay for your coffee. Accept a compliment without immediately giving one back. When someone asks how you are, answer honestly. Instead of automatically saying, fine, train your brain to tolerate receiving. Step 4, set boundaries with the people who are currently draining you. This doesn't mean abandoning everyone. It means recognizing who is in a reciprocal relationship with you and who is simply extracting. With the extractors, you have 2 options: renegotiate the dynamic or reduce contact. There is no option to continue exactly as it is. That path leads to total burnout. Step 5, seek out your own healing spaces, therapy, support groups, friendships where you can be vulnerable. Any context where you can practice receiving. It's not weakness to seek help. It's exactly what you prescribe for everyone else. Apply it to yourself. There's something that Jung wrote that summarizes all of this perfectly. He said that the greatest and most noble adventure that a human being can undertake is the journey back to themselves. You've spent your whole life on journeys for others, for their pain, for their wounds, for their healing. Maybe it's time to finally take the journey that matters, the journey back to you. Huberman would remind us that each step of this journey is literally reconfiguring your brain. Every time you practice receiving, you strengthen circuits that were atrophied. Every time you set a boundary, you prove to your amygdala that vulnerability doesn't mean danger. Every time you take care of yourself, before taking care of others, you break a pattern that may have been decades in the making. It's not easy, but it is possible. And you, who knows so well how to help others change, certainly have the capacity to apply that wisdom to yourself. You just need the courage to finally look at your own wound, instead of hiding behind the wounds of others. There's one last concept that I need to share before wrapping up. Jung called it individuation. It's the process of becoming who you truly are, not who your wounds have forced you to be. For the wounded healer, individuation means discovering who you are. Beyond the role of healer, it means realizing that your identity doesn't depend on being needed, that you have value, even when you're not saving anyone. This is revolutionary for someone who has spent their whole life defining themselves by service to others. Huberman talks about how the brain forms identity through repetition. the roles that you practice repeatedly, become who you believe you are. If you've practiced being a healer for 30 years, your brain literally believes that this is your essence, but it's not. It's a role, an important role, perhaps a valuable one, but still a role. You exist independently of it. The individuation of the wounded healer goes through a period of crisis. You might feel like you're betraying everything you are. You might feel like you're abandoning the people who depend on you. You might feel like you're being selfish, or for the first time in your life, these are good signs. They mean that you're finally breaking out of the pattern. The other end of this crisis is a version of you that can choose when to heal and when to rest, that can give without emptying themselves, that can love without losing themselves, that can be present for others without abandoning themselves. That version of you is not less compassionate. It's more. Because real compassion includes you in the circle of care. If you're a wounded healer who is finally ready to look at your own wound, if you're tired of carrying the weight of the world while your own pain goes forgotten, if you want to learn to receive and as much as you give, leave a comment writing "Wounded Healer." I want to know how many of you identified with this message. And if this video showed you patterns that you couldn't see before, if it gave you an explanation for something that you felt but didn't understand, consider supporting this work through Super Thanks. Each contribution allows me to continue producing content that combines the depth of Jung with the science of Huberman. Content that you won't find anywhere else. The journey of the wounded healer doesn't end when you watch a video. It starts when you finally decide that you deserve the same compassion that you offer to everyone else. Jung said that who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. You've spent too much time looking outside, at the pain of others, at the wounds of others, at the needs of others. Maybe it's time to finally look inside and awaken. Huberman shows us that every moment of awareness physically changes your brain. Each insight creates new neural connections. Each different choice weakens old patterns and strengthens new ones. You're not trapped. You never were. You were just sleeping in a role that you learned so young that you forgot it was a role. The wound that made you a healer doesn't need to define you forever. It can become your greatest teacher, your door to depth, your connection to all the other wounded healers out there. But first, it needs to be seen, recognized, healed. And only you can do that for you. The wounded healer only becomes whole when they finally allow themselves to be healed. The question isn't whether you have the capability. You who knows how to heal others certainly knows how to heal yourself. The question is, are you finally going to allow yourself to be important enough to try?